Hey everyone. So, since becoming a therapist almost 10 years ago, I've noticed a huge increase in our societal awareness around the complexity of trauma. So, I think this is so great because when I entered my counseling program in 2009, there was no trauma class. I mean, the main thing that is underlying so many difficult emotions was not addressed. So, the sad thing about that is that many people left the program feeling unprepared. And if you can imagine a person who is dealing with unresolved trauma, they're living with an implicit physiological state all the time of hyper or hypoarousal. So they go to a therapy session with someone who they're hoping is able to understand, the inner workings of what's going on for them. And unfortunately, trauma starts to get talked about. And in many cases, that can actually, force the person to actually start to come into contact with some of their feelings of fear, hopelessness, shame, rage, but they haven't developed the coping skills to address their early childhood memories that might present, and they can leave feeling unregulated. And then they carry the idea that, oh, this doesn't work. There's no way that I can face my trauma. It's just too difficult. And so with focusing, we work from the bottom up. We actually integrate the body into our work together. So the body becomes a place of resource, which is quite different, you can see. So let's take an example. Let's imagine that somebody is experiencing rage. Now, you know that I all love Greece, right? I came into this room and saw that I had my Greece book. So I'm like, oh, that's perfect. I want to go all the way back to Greece for a minute to just identify the very first culture that recorded this awareness of how trauma affects the mind, that there was a link there. So at that time, they used the word hysteria, which you might have heard through Freud if you're in the counseling realm. But that comes from the word hys- hystera, meaning uterus. And so this is interesting because this word bundled together so many different issues and got placed on women. The myth along with it was quite interesting that the uterus was moving around the body and causing these problems. And there's something, I'd be interested actually to explore that further. But there's also the gender bias involved here, of course, that, oh, all the women with whether they had a dissociative disorder or a mood disorder, rather than looking at the roots of these issues, um, they actually would be labeled with this word hysteria. So I think this still happens a lot. I mean, Freud also influenced our understanding so much. So there's still this tendency for there to be sometimes a therapist who is looking to label, they wouldn't maybe say hysteria now, but they might say depression or anxiety. And sometimes those labels are helpful, but we'll talk more about that another time. What I'm really interested in is how people are coming into contact with these feelings, whether it's through yoga or whether it's through dance, ecstatic dance, anything that opens the channels, breath work, holotropic type breath work. And all of that is like really great stuff, I think, in many ways, but not before we also learn to actually have the coping skills that allow us to face those feelings, again, of fear, rage, helplessness, right? So the way I see it, yoga and dance and art can be beautifully woven into therapy work because they help you move to a place of something new. But before you can get there, you that unprocessed trauma stuff, those memories that are there, we need to be able to build our resilience to face them. So then we're feathering in and out, right? We're kind of titrating with the difficult emotions by resourcing in what feels good. Okay. So you can develop a different narrative. You can integrate difficult emotions and you can restore your patterns and return um, to a natural processes. But you can't do all that through challenging yourself to do something different. So I'm sorry, I got really annoyed with behavioral approaches because a behavior therapist might tell you, oh, you're having issues with Social anxiety, well, force yourself to go to the party and you'll see that it's okay. And maybe on one occasion that works because maybe it was okay. But what if at the party, something happens where you end up feeling this sense of rejection again, right? Then the pattern becomes an even deeper groove. That's a lot like what I was trying to explain to you. If you go to therapy and it's this, the whole session is surrounding talking about a traumatic incident, you can get deeper and deeper into those grooves if you haven't first learned how to be in a state that is different and how to allow yourself to find what in focusing we call life forward energy. So, I just wanted to share with you just that little bit about working with trauma and how, some approaches, like they have qualities about them that can be helpful to weave in, but also to just hold in mind that this change has to happen on the inside. So you can't just you can't force it in your outer world. When the shift happens on the inside, and this is a really respectful way of working, because there's no, no one's the expert of your body and your inner experience. But some people will be more and more skillful about guiding that journey in, and and um, and they'll be able to see where we might need to put on the brakes and backtrack or shift. So that all said, I just want to make the point that when the inner change happens, then, like, I can promise you that the outer world will change. Um, so that's what I wanted to say about working more from the bottom up, working with the body, not trying to somehow work conceptually and hope that the feelings change from there. We've really got to become more and more sophisticated in our way of working with trauma. And if you are a therapist or you're training as a therapist, just know that this is totally learnable stuff. Yeah, and focusing is one of the many approaches nowadays that actually um, that does offer those skills of working more um, attentively and more um, gently with those implicit places. So hopefully that makes some sense, and let me know if you have any questions.